All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Deliver Live Interactivity with Real-Time Streaming at Scale. We are going to get started since it's the top of the hour. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining. We have a very exciting presentation planned for today as we take a look at the need for ultra low latency streaming so that content distributors can build out interactive, immersive experiences ranging from live auctions and virtual retail to online bidding and esports. More specifically today, we're going to take a look at some of the findings from our recent video streaming latency report, as well as how to reliably deliver sub-second streaming to massive audiences across the globe using our newest feature, real-time streaming at scale. So there will be about 45 minutes of presentation today, and we are going to intersperse Q&A throughout. So if you could, please go ahead and input your questions into the Q&A window, and Justin, our video producer, will bring them into the conversation where relevant. So after we look at some of the nuts and bolts of our newest feature, Tim will be doing a really exciting demo. We are excited for that. And we will wrap up with a couple of use cases, looking at how organizations are currently deploying this technology. So if we could go to the next slide, we're going to introduce our speakers. And Justin also has a poll that he'll be launching as we do these intros. So please take some time to answer the 2 questions in the pop-up. That way we can compare the live results with some of the data that we'll be presenting on. As you should see in the pop-up, the questions are, what is your audience size, as well as how much latency are you currently experiencing? So to introduce myself, I am Tracy Ruther. I'm the content marketing manager at Wowza Media Systems. I write a lot of the blogs and reports on our website, and I will be moderating today's discussion. So Barry, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself, we'll just move down the line from there.
Sure. My name is Barry Owen. I've been at Wowza quite a long time now, and I run the solutions engineering organization. So we help build creative solutions for customers.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Barry. Hi, I am Tim Doherty. I'm a sales engineer. I've been with Wowza for a little over 9 years, and I spend most of my time answering customer questions, doing demos, and kind of interacting between our customer-facing teams and our technical teams.
And hi, well, welcome everyone. My name is Robert Vacanti. I am the product manager for our Wowza Streaming Cloud product, of which the technology we're talking about today, real-time streaming at scale, is part of. So I primarily spend my day figuring out what the next great feature is that we can add and making sure that these features are working well for our customers. So thank you all for joining.
Great, thanks, Barry, Tim, and Robert. We also have Justin behind the scenes, as well as Jason, who will be answering some of the questions within the Q&A. And I see some of our poll results popped up. It looks like the majority of people attending this webinar are looking to broadcast to large audiences of 300 plus viewers and are currently experiencing in the sub 45 second, so 10 to 45 second range. So keep that in mind, and we will kind of compare that to some of the results we'll be presenting on in the upcoming slides. And Justin, with that, you can go ahead to the next slide. Okay, great. So we wanted to start out this presentation by looking at some of the industry trends that we've gathered and how these really do inform product development at Wowza. For some context, we launched a survey in August that brought in data from more than 200 broadcasters across the world in really every industry imaginable. And we were seeking to find out what global trends, such as the pandemic that doesn't seem to be going away, have had on business models, as well as really the state of video streaming latency today. And some of the highlights we found is that, for one, most live streams aren't live, which it seems that our poll results that we just had in the last slide kind of echoed this. The majority of survey participants we saw were experiencing a 3-second lag or more in their live broadcasts. Another finding we wanted to call out was that RTMP and HLS are still the most ubiquitously used streaming protocols out there. RTMP on the video contribution side and HLS for playback. But there are a lot of next generation formats on the rise, and of these, low latency is really a key priority. So these include WebRTC, which is the technology behind our real-time streaming at scale feature that we will be looking at today, as well as SRT for ingest, and low latency HLS and low latency CMAF for dash for playback. And then thirdly, we really concluded in this report with data that will back it up on the next 2 slides, that the industry needs real-time streaming at scale. The majority of broadcasters surveyed were aiming to achieve real-time delivery, sub-second delivery to audiences of 300 plus viewers. And this has really been a pain point in the past, since WebRTC is really one of the only technologies that enables sub-second streaming, and it has traditionally been a little bit limited on the large-scale streaming end of things. So if you could go ahead to the next slide, Justin, we will look a little bit more in detail at these findings. Great, so as you can see here, the orange line, that is representative of the actual latency that people are experiencing. So that's definitely skewed in the 3 seconds or more direction, whereas the blue bar graph represents the latencies that broadcasters are hoping to achieve. And unsurprisingly, really everybody's after low latency streaming. And so Tim, Barry, or Robert, any of you can take this. I would love to hear kind of your insight on what are some of the use cases that simply can't handle a delay of like more than 1 second. When does keeping the latency below 1 second or even 500 milliseconds really become critical to a given streaming application?
Yeah, the first thing I think about is public safety. Wowza supports a variety of customers who fly drones, for example. And when they're wanting to relay that very important data to resources, quote unquote, on the ground, literally on the ground, it's important that they have immediate feedback on what's happening. So you think about law enforcement, fire prevention, security. It goes on and on. But that's really a desired ultra low latency example.
And I'd add that we have other customers that are using that need low latency for commercial purposes, and that probably the easiest to understand example is that people are doing auctions, and what we're finding is that people want to be able to have a live auction and at the same time be able to have an auction that's remote. And that really gives the person who's live an advantage if there's any real latency. So for whether that's auctions or live commerce or anything where there's really a degree of interactivity, we really need to be able to have a method where there's not this distinct advantage between individuals, or that people know when an event has occurred. Let's say a product sold out. We have one customer that the problem is their products sell out, and 20 seconds is a long time when people are trying to rush in and make purchases. So whether that's an auction or one of those commerce examples or something like gambling, or kind of to Tim's example, we also have health and fitness, where there's an interactive part of it that customers or viewers are ultimately giving feedback back to the instructor or to the person who's providing that class, that they need to be able to get that feedback much shorter. Because when it's something like 20 seconds, when we actually think about it, 20 seconds can be a long time. It's great when you're watching a movie because it's all unidirectional, but the instant there needs to be a feedback loop of any kind, for a commercial transaction or for feedback, that's really when you need that really, really minimal amount of latency.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that makes sense, definitely, for where like a life is on the line, such as public safety scenarios. That makes sense, but also when there is kind of two-way engagement, sometimes really any latency above 3 seconds will make it so that that workflow isn't seamless and isn't replicating the real life scenario that it's trying to get at. Cool. So if you could go to the next slide, Justin. And yes, so as you can see here, just as the last slide showed that most broadcasters are after sub-second streaming, we also found that the majority of responders to our survey do have an audience size of more than 300 viewers, which was echoed in the poll we just launched to those attending the webinar. And so this is where we are faced with the challenge I touched on before, which is that the only widely available protocol that supports sub-second streaming is WebRTC. And as a video chat technology, it wasn't initially designed with scale in mind. So Robert, I think this is a great place for you to walk us through how real-time streaming at scale has kind of overcomes these limitations, and then provide an overview of the new feature. So we can go ahead to the next slide and I will hand it off to you.
Great, thanks, Tracy. So as Tracy pointed out, the challenge for us was pretty clear, and we've worked with WebRTC, and it's something that's available both in our engine product and our cloud product, but it typically doesn't scale the way that we need. So everybody wants the best of both worlds, very high scale and very low latency. And to date, those have typically not been in the same product. And so that's the challenge that we were faced with in order to try to get a product in the market quickly so that Wowza customers had the best of both worlds. So I'm very happy to announce, as you probably already know, that real-time streaming at scale is something that's now available in the market, something that you can purchase as an add-on to your existing Wowza subscription or get a new subscription to provide both of those benefits. And so what we're able to achieve, largely because of WebRTC, is that sub 500 milliseconds live interactive streaming. And Tim's going to be giving us a demo, so you're going to see exactly what that actually means and how fast it is. But for comparison, I mean, effectively, that's sort of what you'll get on a Zoom meeting. So it's not completely instantaneous, but it's definitely faster than doing something across a satellite, and it's definitely faster than just about any technology that you normally are going to be talking across. So it's very possible to have a highly interactive experience. We also then have partnered to build out a CDN that makes it possible to distribute this to giant audiences. And so what we've got is now a network that's capable of delivering up to 1 million viewers. Obviously, we're doing a lot of distribution and a lot of network fun in order to make sure that we can get that many viewers serviced that quickly. But up to 1 million viewers have had audiences that we believe in the hundreds of thousands that should be that we've seen in practice that's working with. So 1 million viewers is where we currently have set our limit, and we believe, and we've proven in our testing that we can handle that type of scale. And again, largely because of the CDN that we've got sitting behind us for being able to do that distribution. It's on demand availability. We've seen solutions that require you to make a reservation in advance to try to understand and have to plan for these. This is something that's always available. So if you need to be able to do these streams, you can come in to Wowza, just the way all our other features work. If you have to be streaming in a little while, you've got 10 minutes, you go in, you set up the stream. All of this is going to be provisioned and ready and available for you to be using very, very quickly. So something that's always available to you. One other challenge that we had, kind of speaking to what Tracy was talking about WebRTC, WebRTC has very much been built with this idea of that WebRTC is what comes in and WebRTC is what goes out. And if you got that pair, it works very well, but that's also kind of limiting. If you've got any type of production where you're doing something else with your video, that can be limiting. I mean, frankly, WebRTC works really well when we're talking about a webcam, when we're talking about plugging things in the way that we've got them now. We both extended the WebRTC technology in order to be able to deal with things other than just a webcam, and then also made it so you can push in something like RTMP, which, as Tracy alluded to earlier, still dominates an ingress format for being able to broadcast video. So you don't have them as the latency suffers a tiny little bit, so that if you're using RTMP, you're going to get closer to a second rather than that 500 milliseconds. That's still highly interactive for the use cases. Most of the use cases we're talking about, that's fine, but it isn't quite as fast as when you're doing WebRTC. And that was part of our motivation for providing another mechanism for actually doing broadcast and getting WebRTC in rather than being limited to just a browser. So we'll talk about that in a second. Globally available, distribution is not limited to any given continent or any given region. So if you've got viewers that are spread across the globe, the CDN is set up to be able to do that distribution. So our expectation, in fact, is not that if you've got hundreds of thousands of viewers, they will all be located in the US or in Europe or in Asia. They'll be around the world, and the network is set up in order to be able to address that. That also, by the way, from an ingress standpoint, we also are working on getting distribution or getting ingress points around the world, so it's possible for that video to come in any place around the world as well. And then finally, with Wowza Professional Services, we've made this very easy with the APIs that we already have, and with Wowza Professional Services providing a quick start with the real-time streaming at scale packages to make it so implementation is simple and get you live quickly, so you can quickly start realizing the benefits of real-time streaming at scale. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide, Justin. This is kind of a picture that looks familiar probably to those of you who have seen other Wowza webinars. This is showing, though, some of the specifics. So at the very top and at the left-hand side, you'll see the different mechanisms that we can use in order to bring video in. And then enhancement that I was talking about was that we've got OBS, a special version of OBS that we've worked on in order to be able to have it provide WebRTC directly into Wowza Streaming Cloud. So that really gives us both the advantage of being able to have the very, very low latency and be able to deal with production streams. When in different surveys that we've done, we found that OBS is extremely heavily used by our customers, and so we wanted to make sure that that was available. This gives you a way of being able to use OBS, pull video in from a variety of sources, submit it via WebRTC, and provide that 500 millisecond or less latency that you would expect if you were just doing browser to browser. As I work down that list, the browser-based capture obviously is also an option. And Tim will be showing some of that. Tim will be showing some of the OBS, but you'll see that just using your webcam, you can easily just use browser-based capture and also maintaining that 500 millisecond. And then finally, the need to be able to do RTMP. So if you've got an encoder that's not either OBS or going to be using a browser, you can use that. And that's obviously the de facto standard that lots of people use. You're going to get probably sub-second, but maybe somewhere closer to a second rather than 500 milliseconds. But it's possible then for you to use this technology for all of your use cases rather than it just being limited to either OBS or browser-based. In all cases, all of that obviously is feeding into Wowza Streaming Cloud. We've got a very simple API that I'll talk about in a second on the next slide about how that works. And then Wowza Streaming Cloud does some packaging, a little bit of work, less than you were probably familiar with the rest of Wowza Streaming Cloud. In order to maintain that latency, we can't do heavy processing. So there are things like some technical facts, like this is using UDP rather than using TCP. And then we're not doing all of the manipulation that we would otherwise do with a video because we're trying to get this through as quickly as we possibly can. And then ultimately passed off to that CDN that makes it possible to do the giant distribution. And that gives us the ability to push it to that number of viewers. So whether you've got a small number and you're doing something for a conference or a small chat session, or doing it for a very large broadcast audience, that CDN is there to be able to do that distribution. So you can go ahead and advance the slide, and I think, do we have any questions at this point, Justin?
We do have some questions come in. I also am going to launch a poll while you can answer some of the questions. One was regarding, are there any plans for this as a pay-as-you-go plan?
At the moment, as we have it right now, it is not available as pay-as-you-go. It's something that we encourage you to buy a package for so that we can give you all the services. And we've structured the packages in such a way that hopefully there's one that meets your needs very closely. But right now there are a few discrete packages that we're selling that include the amount of bandwidth and the hours of processing that you'll need in order to distribute that video.
The best advice there is to get in touch with a sales guy, and someone like Tim or one of our great SEs can really help you get into the right plan for what you're trying to do.
Awesome. Another question, I think previously you showed that it was possible to go from RTMP to WebRTC. What about RTSP? They have customers that have many IP cameras, and they want to know how the latency is compared with those.
So go ahead, Barry.
As I say, for workflows that aren't WebRTC or RTMP currently, It is possible. We can take that stream into a Wowza Cloud instance and relay it on. So for SRT or RTSP or something like that, we can get the system to work and you will get the same scale out and things like that. It will add a little bit of latency. You know, there's no free lunch here when we have to convert from one protocol to another. So again, give us a call. We'd happy to spin up a POC for you that can help you show and see what you're going to get in real time. You know, it's going to be far better than what you're going to get with HLS or some HTTP based format.
Awesome. And those are the questions. And I've just ended the poll for anyone who's interested. The top one was achieving real-time streaming. So that's what we're talking about.
Great. So I wanted to add, one thing to build on what Barry said in terms of really one of the things that we bring to the WebRTC table that other companies have not. WebRTC is an open standard, stuff that's available for other companies to be implementing as well. But we've got this full toolkit. So if you've got something like RTMP, we're trying to make it so that you're not limited to this one size must fits all, which is WebRTC in and WebRTC out. And that's what we see the primary use cases that the rest of our competitors are able to do. We recognize that's not the only use case that's out there. So whether that's being able to do RTMP, so we added that and made it so that you can push that video in as well. We also took and we made sure OBS was available so that if you've got a production workflow, you've got a way of pulling that in. Because we've got the power of all the other pieces of Wowza, if we want to be able to do something like bring RTSP in, Barry and his team are capable of having a way to be able to use the other tools that we have for Wowza in order to put that together. So yes, one of the big differentiators is that we've gone from standard WebRTC in order to be adding a lot of scale. And then we've got all the other things that we as Wowza can do. So you can choose not only if you've got a stream that requires this very low latency, you can use this technology, real-time streaming at scale. If you've got a standard broadcast stream that's doing something that's completely unidirectional, that doesn't need that interactivity, we've got the rest of Wowza Streaming Cloud and Wowza Streaming Engine in order to be able to do it. So the toolkit is much broader with Wowza, so you can build the solution that really meets the needs of your viewers, as opposed to being forced into whatever mold other providers are able to provide you with. So I just wanted to add that. The one now, as we move on to this slide, talking about using real-time streaming at scale. There are a couple pieces, and Tim's going to be showing us. This is kind of a preview of parts of that. But what we have is a very simple REST interface. If you want to drive this by API and be creating multiple streams, you can go in, and there are really only 5 endpoints. You can see those there. It talks about create, fetch one, fetch all, update the name, and delete. And that's effectively what you need to do in order to create one of these streams. You call this REST endpoint, you provide it with nothing more than a name, and it returns the ID and the security tokens that you'll need in order to pull that, in order to set up that stream. I'll also note we've got this built into our UI as well. So if you're doing a small number of streams, a handful, you can also go into the UI, effectively you give it a name and you return that exact same information so that you can use those in order to build your stream. Now, because this is WebRTC, it is still relatively browser-based. In some cases, we can use different things, as I talked about, to pull things in, but the playback is going to occur on a browser. So what we've provided, in the next little bullet we've got there, is JavaScript SDKs. And those JavaScript SDKs give you a very easy way to either build the broadcaster for publishing that content that will be part of a web page that can be embedded inside of your site effectively, that makes it possible to control the settings for that broadcast experience. That then, using the keys that I talked about previously, are what connects you specifically to the Wowza Streaming Cloud stream that is yours. And then at the other end, there's also a JavaScript SDK that allows you to build a publishing experience or a playback experience. So you embed that in a page, you have playback, and that's what your viewers are both going to be used. And we've tried to simplify that a great deal, because previously, of course, all your major browsers, Safari and Firefox and Chrome, all have WebRTC built in, but building an entire client inside that, doing all the JavaScript, is somewhat of a lift. So we're trying to give you a much more abstract way to be able to add both publishing and playback without having to do that big lift. And I will also add, of course, we've got as I mentioned earlier, quick start that comes with those packages that the professional services team and Barry and Tim work on that to be able to get you up and running very quickly. And then finally, I just wanted to mention activating real-time streaming. If you're an existing customer, this is something that, because it's part of the existing Wowza Streaming Cloud platform, you're not going to get another account. You're not going to get a new anything. It's just a matter of figuring out how much usage you want, and then we can add that to your existing account. If, on the other hand, you're a new customer, you either can sign up for a Wowza account and then add that. So you've got the flexibility of doing either HLS and what other type of streaming you might want to do in Wowza Streaming Cloud, or doing real-time streaming at scale, or it's possible to just have your package be very focused just on real-time streaming. So we're very flexible in terms of providing you what you need in order to be able to stream using both real-time streaming and the other powerful features of Wowza Streaming Cloud. So with that, unless there are questions, I'm going to hand it off to Tim, who's going to show you exactly how all this works and how real-time it really is.
Hey, Robert, before we go into that demo, there were some questions that came in via email I wanted to ask, which was one, how does Wowza's offering compare to other real-time streaming platforms that are leveraging WebRTC?
Kind of what I mentioned earlier. We've got scale that many other WebRTC platforms don't have. There are other companies that do also offer relatively large-scale WebRTC based distribution, but it's they frankly have that one technology for being able to do WebRTC. So if you had the need to be able to pull in an RTSP stream the way that Barry described, you don't have that flexibility to be able to do that. You also don't have the ability to choose between, are you using RTM, do you want to use WebRTC or do you want to use HLS? There is a difference between the two of those, and they lend themselves to very different problems. So Wowza is giving you the ability to do what's appropriate for your given stream because we provide you a broader set of technology. And so really our differentiator is so we've got large scale, which not all WebRTC has. We've got the ability to do a variety of different input protocols and still maintain very low latency. And then the ability to really customize and build exactly the workflow you need because we have other technology that we can bring to bear, as Barry talked about. So if you have something like RTSP, there's still a way to be able to do that.
And I'd like to highlight also, with the Wowza platform, you can do hybrid models, right? So we've had many customers who come in and let's take an auction site, for example. The people who are actually bidding on the auction may need a real-time stream. But the people who are casually watching the auction, like all those people who tune in to watch car auctions just because it's cool, but have no intention to bid, they don't need a real-time stream. They can be, you can have a hybrid model where you get the best of both worlds, and it really helps you optimize your cost and your economics of what you're trying to do, but still deliver the best experience for both use cases.
Awesome.
Thank you, Barry.
I'm going to hold off on the other email questions because I can see Tim is. Oh well, I was about to say, Tim, you're ready to go.
I am.
So
forgive me for turning the share off and then back on. I wanted to make sure it was quote optimized for video, so that was my oversight there. But yeah, we're ready to go, Justin. Whenever you guys are.
Okay, please feel free.
All right. Well, what I'm going to do really briefly here is just walk you through what it takes to set up a real-time streaming at scale stream directly from Wowza Streaming Cloud. Those of you who may be familiar with our cloud product, you certainly recognize the UI that I have here in Chrome. And very simply, this is the control portal where you can create any type of stream with Wowza Cloud. Yeah, go ahead.
You're sharing OBS and the playback window.
Oh, I am. Okay. Thank you. Is that better?
Now just the playback window.
I'm sorry. I'm not following, Justin. Or excuse me, Robert. Do you not see my browser?
It says window projector preview.
Okay, let me reset this, folks. Did it improve?
Yes. Now you have what I think you expect.
Okay. All right.
We have everything.
Sorry about that. Let me dive right in. You're in Wowza Streaming Cloud, and thank you. You're in Wowza Streaming Cloud, and you want to create a real-time streaming at scale stream. So we go to Advanced. We go to Real-Time Streams. And it's very intuitive. There's a button right here that says Add Real-Time Stream. You can see other streams that have previously been recorded. I'm going to go ahead and add the stream. I'm going to call it Wednesday Webinar, which will create the information we need. So if you're using OBS or any other RTMP encoder, you can use this URL and stream key to set that up. And we'll do that towards the latter part of my session. But right now I'm going to grab the stream name and put it into, this is just an SDK interpretation. This is one of my colleagues built this on our sales engineering team just to demonstrate the product. It certainly can be customized and should be customized for your web application. So I know I'm loading the stream name and the token. And that brings up, this is a source WebRTC broadcaster on the left. I'm going to go ahead and hit start. And then it's going to build up the stream in the background. And very shortly, we should see in the right side the actual playback. And so what I have here is just a simple player. This is wall clock time. So it's on the 30-minute mark, 32 seconds. And then through Zoom, you don't see as much frame rate, but it's actually going really fast, the milliseconds. So you can see source. And then this is round trip video right here. I could do a screenshot to demonstrate the actual latency, which is kind of interesting because, it's hard to calculate that just by the naked eye. My screenshot is rendered. If I drop that right here, you can see that those of you who are really good at math, we're 13 or 86 minus 13. That's about, Robert, help me out here. How many?
14 and 13, 27 milliseconds.
Okay. So 27 tenths of a second, something like that.
270 milliseconds.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You can see that that's really good performance right there. And it's very consistent. And then if I want to actually watch this screen outside of the SDK, I can copy that, bring it up in another browser tab, and you can actually see the stream itself playing, which is much more interesting. I'm going to go ahead and paste this in the Zoom chat for everyone to see, which kind of makes it a little more interesting on your part. So if you click in the Zoom chat, if you have access to that, you may not, if you're watching on YouTube or other social media sites, you can see that, the playback is quite clear. So that's the real quick end to end. I also have the ability to play this back using OBS. And you can see that I was kind of wrestling with that earlier. So the first thing I want to do is I will go back to Wowza Cloud, and you'll remember this URL that I was referring to. So this is the base URL. There's the domain, port, and then some application information. I already have this in OBS from testing previously. So I'm just going to grab the stream key and the token here. So I'm going to just copy that, go over to OBS. I'm sure my colleagues can confirm that they can see what I'm showing on my screen here. Okay, good. So I'm going to replace a previous stream key with the current stream key. And then I'm just going to start streaming. And what we should see here now, this is actually the output from OBS. So I'm going to close this just to keep myself honest. So the WebRTC is completely offline. I close that browser window, and this is coming from OBS. And then I can grab that preview screen I had up earlier. Is this looking okay? Is it rendering all right for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, good. And then let's do another quick screenshot. And we should be able to measure the RTMP round trip time from OBS, which is kind of cool. Screenshot's going to be here in just a second. And we are getting about the same. Well, that's actually really good performance. It's definitely under a second. Looks like about roughly half a second. So that's kind of cool that you can just drop that information in OBS, and we're sending RTMP and we're getting really good performance. And honestly, that's really the end-to-end demo. We do have some other opportunities we're working on with OBS where we will be able to speed that up even more. But as you can see, you go into Wowza Streaming Cloud, you generate a stream, you've got this information right here. You put it into your SDK or how you're utilizing the SDK to build that publisher, or just drop it into your RTMP encoder and you're good to go. So it's as easy as it appears.
We had a few questions, again, that I mentioned that came in via email that relate to these kinds of things that you're just showing right now. One of them was, do we have to use OBS?
Absolutely not. No, you can use it at any RTMP encoder. We would like to help you when you do implement real-time streaming at scale. Just work with our professional services team for a quick start, and we make sure that you get all the optimal settings in your encoder. There may be some buffers, there may be some settings that are specific to your encoder that really contribute to ultra low latency streaming. But no, it's intended to be used by any RTMP encoder. That's a great question.
Excellent. And the second question that I had that came in was, is it possible to implement a custom player? I assume they're asking this because we're talking about WebRTC.
It is possible to implement a custom player, but it needs to be based on our SDK. So the SDK itself handles the exchange of information back and forth between our platform and the browser to establish the WebRTC connection. And that stuff needs to be there. So customizing the player as far as look and feel and how it's wrapped and things like that is very possible. And there's a lot you can do within the SDK, but you have to have the guts of our core JavaScript for the platform to work.
Thank you. And some other email questions that came in through the Q&A window. Beyond, they want a recording of this. Is this currently available for testing?
I would ask you to contact our professional services or your salesperson. We can provide you with a demo and a bit of, capacity in order to be able to test it. Because one other thing in terms of that, that timing that we've got, we don't have as much flexibility to meter it the way that we have with other things. So we need to set it up in a slightly more custom fashion. But yes, it is available for you to take a look at.
Awesome. Last question I have here is, are you able to support RTMP in the browser for broadcasting?
No, it's generally a bad practice to use RTMP in the browser just because of the well-known issues with the security regarding the Flash plugin. So we're no longer doing RTMP in the browser.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. And thank you for that info, Tim. I think from here, we wanted to go ahead and take a look at some of the use cases of how this feature is currently being used and some of the challenges that real-time streaming at scale is helping to solve. So Tim, if you could take this one.
Okay, well, a student lecture platform is actually very interesting. Wowza's primary benefits is we give you that live real-time interactivity. So, using Wowza Streaming Cloud, and even our engine product, it's not super difficult to set up a WebRTC end-to-end system. But think about how many people need to watch this. And the real-time streaming at scale platform, as Robert described earlier, has virtually unlimited scaling. I mean, if you have a classroom setting where 1 million people need to attend, that's going to be quite the global event, in my opinion. But it does have the ability to automatically scale. And I like to share with our customers that if you take advantage of this platform, you're responsible for the content and the network to get it there. We take care of the rest, the scaling, et cetera. So obviously, real-time streaming at scale with Wowza Cloud is the product for that. 500 to 1,000 students, not an issue. Interactivity is critical, and you've probably heard that term several times during this session. We work with colleges, high schools, universities, any label that you put on an educational institution. We work with them and make sure that they have that interactive capability, particularly chat and interacting with slide decks and artifacts that are presented during that session. So low latency streaming is critical. It can be a struggle when you hit around 300 viewers, and that's kind of where I'm emphasizing the scalability. Wowza Streaming Cloud, again, has a very standard WebRTC solution, but there's a little bit of anxiety right around that 300 viewer tipping point. So it's good to take into consideration, do you want to worry about scale or not? If you don't, real-time streaming at scale is the solution for you. So we've had people using Wowza's real-time streaming at scale to support interactivity, keep the latency down below a second, and really enhance and enrich the classroom experience.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tim. And Justin, if you could go to the next slide. Our next example is in the live event conferencing space. So Barry, if you could tell us a little bit more about this one.
Yeah, this is a great use case, right? So, this is an established event technology company that's provided everything from event planning and logistics to internal, external streaming, and everything in between. And of course, during the pandemic, many of these events went to virtual only or perhaps hybrid events. And by allowing this company to use a real-time streaming and a highly scalable solution, they were able to pivot and create this platform for all of their events and all their users without worrying about infrastructure, scale, and things like that. They had tried this with the previous provider. The previous provider kept falling over, significantly higher than Tim's 300. They were at about 3,000 viewers. But again, these people could have up to 100,000 viewers. This could be a TED Talk. This could be something like that, where they really needed, a live interactive event experience. This also allowed them to create things like, breakout rooms and birds of a feather sessions and things like that, and be able to spin up these little interactive sideshows in addition to their events. And, one of the key selling points for these folks as well was they need to be able to create thousands of these streams. So they were able to leverage the Wowza Cloud API and create as many streams as they needed and prepare themselves for their events and, really meet the needs of their customers. They were so successful with this and so happy with how it worked is they've already started to expand the use to allow side feeds, if you will, via WebRTC to be able to do things like sign language translation and multilingual services in real time with their main formats. So overall, it's been a great win for this customer and really allowed them to eliminate a lot of other things and consolidate into a single platform.
Awesome. And then Justin, if you could go to the next slide, I believe we are at Q&A. So we've been doing those throughout, but do we have any more questions either via email or in the chat window, Justin?
Yes, we do have some questions. Some of them are fairly technical, though. I'm not sure if we want to get into them here. Barry, I'm sure you can see it. It's up to you if you want me to ask that question relating to VR video processes. It seems like it's something that maybe they need to be speaking with our professional services directly about.
Yeah, give me a call. We can talk about that. Maybe I will type a bit of an answer in there, but that's probably a bit specific for a webinar.
Okay, so anonymous attendee, please either contact our sales department or our professional services, and they can certainly help you. Noah Parks is asking, are you saying your RTMP scales better than your WebRTC? I think Noah's a bit confused.
No, they're the same. So we're talking input formats and output formats, right? So our platform takes in RTMP or WebRTC. The output is always WebRTC at very high scale. They scale equally. The only thing that happens when we take in an RTMP feed versus a WebRTC feed is, by the nature of RTMP, we're forced to transcode the audio into a WebRTC compatible format. So that adds a bit of latency. The only other thing that adds any latency between an RTMP ingest and a WebRTC ingest is that RTMP is TCP based. So depending on your network conditions, that RTMP feed may be delayed because of packet retransmissions and other things. So those are the two differences. On the output side, it's all WebRTC, and we don't care what the source is as far as the number of viewers we can support.
All right. And Noah is also asking, and I assume he's relating this to RTMP, can I use OBS 23.2.0?
For RTMP, you can use whatever RTMP capable encoder you have. That could be Wirecast, that could be a piece of hardware, or it could be OBS. The version of OBS that we have modified will be continually updated to the latest versions of OBS as they are available. And that one will allow you to do WebRTC specifically.
All right. Mike is asking, is this limited top RTMP or WebRTC, or can I also use SRT as a source?
So I think, is it limited to?
Limited to,
RTMP?
yeah.
I think Barry covered that earlier, but let's cover it again. If you're doing a hybrid solution using Wowza Streaming Cloud, you can take advantage of any input protocol that we have available, which definitely includes SRT, RTMP, RTSP, and perhaps others that I'm not thinking of offhand. So you do have the option with Wowza Cloud to take in and benefit from SRT, for example, but then it gets pushed by RTMP into the the real-time streaming at scale CDN, and you can still get remarkably low latency, but there is a little bit of tax there because you're having to do the ingest and repackage. But the answer is yes to that.
All right, and it looks like we have one more question in from Anonymous. Will RTMP streams lose lip sync precision, or is the video out of sync with the audio? Can lip sync be maintained?
Definitely.
Yeah, lip sync should be maintained just fine. Everything gets processed as normal, and the timestamps survive the AAC to Opus transcode.
I would suggest using a powerful computer. Don't under resource. For example, if you're using OBS, because often that audio video sync issue occurs when the source is under stress. But our system is very much set up to maintain that ideal sync throughout the entire broadcast.
All right. I think those are all the questions we have.
All right, great. Well, that pretty much wraps up our presentation today. I want to thank all of the panelists, Barry, Tim, and Robert, for an exciting conversation. And I also want to thank everybody attending for your participation and questions throughout. I also want to remind everyone to check out our video streaming latency report for a much more in-depth look at trends. We looked at a couple of graphs, but the report itself is like more than 25 pages, and it looks a lot more in depth at protocol usage, different industries that are leveraging low latency, and all of that good stuff. So we will actually be sending a link to everybody in the follow-up email for this webinar. But for those of you tuning in on Facebook Live or YouTube, it can also be found on wowza.com. If you just want to navigate up to our resources drop down and select reports and guides, you can find it there. Next slide, Justin. Okay, so as always, please contact us for additional information. Our contact details are all available on this slide. Sales@wowza.com is always a great place to start, especially if you are interested in getting started with real-time streaming at scale. I hope those of you watching have a great day or night, whatever is appropriate from where you're tuning in at. And thank you again, Barry, Tim, Robert, and Justin and Jason behind the scenes.